up on this episode of Photography Online. We brave some fierce winds to show you what difference tripod spikes make. We witness one of wildlife's greatest spectacles. And we look at all the options when it comes to scanning film. Welcome to another episode of Photography Online, which is once again commercial free, so we won't be interrupting the flow with any adverts. Before we kick off our first feature, here's a quick photography question for you. What was the resolution of the first ever digital camera? Was it 4 megapixels, 1.2 megapixels, 0.5 megapixels, or 0.01 megapixels? This is just for fun, and we'll be answering the question later on in the show. Now, we've covered lots of information about tripods in recent shows, and the most common question that we get asked is about the spiked feet that all of our experts use. You want to know what difference they make, so we thought we'd show you.
We've previously covered a lot of information about tripods on Photography Online, but one thing we are often asked about is the spiked feet which we are seen using.
I thought it'd be useful to show you the difference that having spikes on your tripod makes. So I've come here today in this rather vicious wind to show you just what a difference it will make to your images.
Before that, let me explain just how spiked feet work. If you have standard rubber feet on your tripod, then these will only be effective if used on very solid and sturdy ground in very calm conditions. A tripod is only ever as stable as the ground it is supported by, so even if you have the world's sturdiest tripod and you place it on wobbly ground, it's effectively useless, especially in windy conditions.
And this is why I've come here today. But even in dead calm conditions, just a shutter going off inside the camera can cause enough vibrations to be noticeable in a photo if your tripod isn't well grounded. Guess which tripod has the spikes?
Spikes come in many shapes and sizes. Smaller ones are of little use, as to have any effect, they need to be embedded well into the ground. The longer the spikes, the better the contact you will get. But obviously there is a happy medium between being long enough and looking like you're carrying a weapon.
I use King Joy tripods because I consider them to be the best on the market, and they all come with these stainless steel 4cm spikes as standard. Now, while these are perfectly adequate, I got King Joy to make some even longer ones, which are 5.5 centimeters, so you can see they're quite a bit longer. These go even further into the ground and offer more stability. Now, both sizes come in two options, stainless steel and alloy. The advantage of the stainless steel ones is they're much tougher, so they'll last a lot longer. The advantage of the alloy ones is they're much lighter, but after a while, especially when used on hard surfaces, they do tend to blunt, so you will need to replace them after a year or two.
The experiment I'm doing today will compare two identical tripods, one with spikes and one with standard rubber feet. I'll be doing the experiment on 3 different surfaces: super soft in the form of heather or moss, soft in the form of grass, and hard in the form of rock. We'll then compare the results from each one to see just how influential tripod spikes are on the final image.
So first up is the test on super soft spongy ground, which is typical of what we might find when we're out taking landscape photos. As you can see, this isn't stable at all. Now, the winds are blowing about 60 miles an hour at the moment, and I know many photographers who wouldn't even bother turning up on a day like today because they wouldn't be confident they could get sharp shots. But that's probably because they don't have spikes on their tripod.
Just by doing a simple wobble test with a finger, it's immediately obvious that this tripod, the one with spikes, is far sturdier than the one which is about as stable as a Scotsman at a Hogmanay party with a free bar. Using the same camera, same lens, same everything, the only difference was the tripod feet. This is the image which didn't use spikes. And this is the image which did use spikes. As you can see, there is a massive difference, far greater than would be achieved by spending a lot of money on a better lens or camera. This difference was achieved by spending only £24 on spikes.
Next up, we're going to do the same experiment, but this time on soft ground, such as grass, which is probably the most likely terrain we're going to find ourselves working in. Now, once again, the tripod spikes can be driven into the earth, which makes the tripod an extension of the ground that it's sitting on. This isn't the case if you've just got rubber feet, where the tripod is just resting loosely on the ground.
Here's the shot using spikes on soft ground. Even in 60-mile-an-hour winds, at an exposure time of 5 seconds, there's little evidence of movement, with only a slight softness to the image. Now, the same tripod without spikes, and straight away, we can see a mushiness to the image, which is caused by camera vibration.
So finally, the same test again, this time on solid ground. Now, you might not expect there to be that much difference here because obviously I can't sink the spikes into solid rock. However, as you can see, the rubber feet are still moving around quite a bit, so we haven't got as much stability as we do have with the spikes, which grip onto the rock.
Here's the version using spikes, which looks very similar to the other two versions where we use spikes, with little evidence of camera movement. And here's the version using standard feet. Although not as much difference, you can still see that this version is slightly softer than the spiked foot shot. Here's all 3 spiked feet versions, which are reasonably consistent. And the same for the rubber feet versions, which show more variation as would be expected.
So even on solid surfaces, spikes offer more stability than rubber feet do. But more importantly, they're more consistent regardless on what surface you use them on. Now, it should be said at this point that to get the most out of spikes, you do need to fit them to a very solid and sturdy tripod. If you put these on an inferior tripod, they're not going to be that much use.
In my experience, spikes work better than any other feet on almost any surface, including sand and snow. The only surface I wouldn't use them on is a wooden or marble floor if I was doing interior photography for a hotel, for example.
You can fit spikes to most good tripods, just make sure that you can unscrew the rubber feet and that the thread is a standard 3/8 of an inch. Assuming that's the case, then you can just pop on some spikes, which will increase the stability of your tripod and therefore improve the quality of your photos.
Some spikes can be very expensive, but you don't need to spend a lot of money. The ones I use are available from the MC2 photography shop and cost as little as £15.
You could argue that that's the best money you can possibly spend for such a drastic improvement in the quality of your photos.
We've got 5 sets of our long alloy tripod spikes to give away, so to be with a chance of winning, all you need to do is follow the link below. As Marcus just said, various options of tripod spikes are available from our shop. They fit any tripod which has the standard 3/8 screw thread on the bottom of each leg. If in doubt, do feel free to ask before you buy. You'll also find tripods, filters, t-shirts and beanies in there, not to mention our brand new Essential Camera Skills Series 2 book. Buying anything through our shop helps to support our channel and allows us to do what we do, making this show. So here we are in the depths of winter in the Northern Hemisphere, which might not be the best time for most wildlife subjects, but there's one spectacle which only happens in the winter and it's one of the most photogenic. Harry recently went to check it out.
It's early December and I should be lapping up the sun in Africa, but due to ongoing travel restrictions, I'm still here in the UK. Africa may be home to some of the most enigmatic wildlife on the planet and most amazing wildlife spectacles. But here in the UK, I'm on the hunt for arguably one of the most spectacular wildlife spectacles anyone can see in the world, and it's right on millions of people's doorsteps. So what is it that can rival the sight of elephants wandering through the bush or the great migration of wildebeest? Well, believe it or not, it is the humble, ubiquitous and perhaps almost boring looking starling. Whilst not as common as they once were, starlings can be found right across the UK, Europe and North America. Individually, starlings may not be the most interesting of birds, though still pretty in my opinion. Can this plain-looking garden bird really trump watching lions at dusk? I arrived nice and early at a local bird reserve and had some other characters to keep me company while I waited. In the autumn and winter months, starlings congregate into much larger groups than the rest of the year. That's because they're partial migrants, so here in the UK, it means our birds here are joined by cousins from the continent escaping cold winter conditions. Whilst they spread out to feed individually during the day, as dusk approaches, small groups of starlings will start to appear in the sky above their communal roosting area, the place they'll spend the night resting and sleeping. Gradually, more and more will appear, until there's hundreds, thousands, and even tens of thousands all in the sky together. This is a murmuration. Starlings form such large congregations primarily because there is safety in numbers. By coming into roost all at once, they can overwhelm all the potential predators that would happily pick off any stragglers. Trying to photograph such an overwhelming sight is not as straightforward as it might first appear. Wildlife photography generally brings with it the instinct to zoom in, utilising a telephoto lens. When faced with tens of thousands of subjects, however, this option quickly becomes limiting. A wider angle or short telephoto becomes a much better proposition. And here I primarily used a 24 to 105mm zoom to give me the most flexibility. Similarly, the usual first reaction in a wildlife photography situation is to maintain the fastest possible shutter speed to capture the action. With so much movement occurring in starling murmurations, it is a fantastic opportunity to experiment with varying exposure times, altering the amount of movement captured. For me, it boils down to the conditions at the time, whether I opt for a nice fast exposure time or attempt something slower. In these examples, 1/60th and 1/80th of a second were used to give a slightly more abstract quality to the last groups of starlings arriving to the roost. When in doubt, try a bit of everything. Wide, long, fast, and slow. Timing is key. Avoid the temptation to sit and check images on the back of the camera, as the shapes a big murmuration produces may only last a second or two. Watch carefully, and you may be rewarded with unique patterns and recognisable objects generated by the swirling birds. As the numbers reach their peak and the last of the light fades, the birds suddenly decide the time is right, as if by a secret signal. They funnel down into the reeds in one last whoosh of wings. And that's it, the show's over. The birds settled down to sleep in the reeds, and it's time for me to head home. There are few words to describe seeing and experiencing a starling murmuration in person. It is a total sensory experience, the sight, the noise, the rush of air as they pass low overhead. It truly is one of the greatest natural spectacles.
Now, lots of you contact us with suggestions of topics to cover, but most of the time the suggestions are things that we've already covered in past episodes. We have got this handy list of contents which you can download if you want to see everything that we've already covered on the show. It'll then tell you which episode to find it on, so download that if you think there's something that we've not done yet, as the chances are it's already there waiting for you to watch. As always, there is a link to download this in the usual place. So, as well as sending in your suggestions, many of you have also been sending us in your photos for critique. So, without further delay, let's join Dr. Nick and see what he's got to say.
It's been a while now since we've opened the surgery doors, so it's about time we took a critical look at some of the photos you've sent in for a full checkup. And first up is this image here from Saran Maharjan from Nepal. I really like this image, especially the time of capture of the image. I think is pretty perfect in terms of balancing the artificial light with the ambient light. And you've got these really nice dark, moody, brooding clouds hanging above the scene as well. The introduction of the trees coming in from the top left hand of the frame I think it works really well with this. It's framing that corner of the image, removing some of the empty space in the sky. And the traffic trails, pretty perfect exposure time, having the trails coming straight through the scene, and also capturing the image at a time when the road is wet, and that really allows those colourful lights of the reds, the yellows and the oranges to be reflected in the road as well, so that's really nice there. And now if I'm being picky, and I know I do this all the time when this shows up, but dust spots. It's a big bugbear of mine, you know, so if you are going to send images and I'm going to be critiquing them, make sure they don't have dust spots. Next up we have an image by Dario Amadi, and this was captured in Richmond Park near London. And here we have two red deer stags with their antlers are interlocked, and this is during the rut when they're battling out to show who is the strongest stag to get the attention of the female. Now captured, I'm guessing pre-sunrise, we've got this beautiful red and orange sky silhouette in the subjects in front of this, and from what I can see they're pin sharp, so really well done there. Now just one minor thing for me, so here on the left hand stag we can see there's a gap here between the belly and the grass, so you can see the daylight in between there, whereas on the one on the right the stag is just too low, so there's no real separation between the belly and the ground there. Now I'm assuming Dario may have a sequence of images here where the stag's heads were at different heights, and if they were just a little bit higher, you just get that gap there on the right hand one. Just a minor thing for me, but apart from that, a beautiful image. Next up we have this river shot here by Gerard Hopkinson. I like the flow of the image where the river basically just kind of snakes through from the back of the scene down to this foreground rock here, using that nicely to fill the gap in this area of water at the bottom of the frame where there's just really nothing going on. Now for me the length of the exposure, or the exposure time, I think is just too long because the water's a bit too silky smooth for my personal preference. I'm guessing it's several seconds, maybe even longer than that, and I would have opted for a quicker exposure time of maybe half a second or even quicker, 1/8 of a second would just show that texture still in the water but still kind of smoothing out a little bit. So that's just one minor thing for me. Next up we have this image here by Gary Michels, and this is Busselton Jetty, which is in the southwest of Western Australia. Really nice composition here with the jetty coming in from the left of the frame going all the way towards the right of the frame there. I don't think this could have been composed really any better because it's such a long jetty and he's basically filling the frame with it. And the use of the edge of the sand where the sand meets the sea in the bottom right hand corner also helps to lead you up to these four buildings here. Here we have a really nice dark moody sky hanging above the scene, so it really helps to get a lot of atmosphere to the shot. Now I think Gary may have done some work in either Lightroom or Photoshop to bring the colour of the sky in reflection to the colour of the buildings. Nothing wrong with that, because it really helps to create this blue tone throughout the scene, from the sky to the blue buildings and to the sea. So I think in this instance it works really well. Next up we have an image here by Ian Moore, and the reason why I've chosen this one is that it was taken handheld, and this was in a slot canyon in the lower half of the South Island of New Zealand. And handheld shots with slightly long exposures are not the easiest things to do, although modern cameras with their inbuilt image stabilization kind of help with that. But Ian has done a really good job here, and I think his choice of exposure time is really good. It's probably only something short like 1/5 of a second, which for me is perfect in this instance. Just slowing down the water enough, but to create that slightly silkiness. And there's some nice light coming in from the top of the canyon, really highlighting these almost luminescent mosses on the rocks. It's really nicely done there. If we zoom into the image, there is just a slight kind of softness at the top of the frame here on the left and the right, but when we come down to the middle of the shot, where I guess you could, this may be the most important part of the image, where you've got all these mosses, that's pin sharp. So I'm guessing that Ian may have used a wide aperture and just got a shallow depth of field, but nonetheless, really nicely done. And finally, and my favourite image for this surgery is this image here by Torbjörn Johnson. I do apologise if I've just butchered your name. Really like this image from the viewpoint, the low viewpoint, looking up at the subject. Works really nicely to show the height of this building on these stilts. The black and white conversion has been done really nicely. Loads of contrast in the image. I can't really fault it. Maybe I'm just nitpicking here, but I'm not sure whether it would have included this structure here on the right, which looks like a chimney or something. Now if I just do a simple crop and remove that down, for me it just works better, and there's actually balance from the space on the left of the image and the space on the right. But that's just one minor thing, that's just my opinion, but apart from that, a really beautifully done image. Keep sending in your photos if you'd like us to feature them in a future surgery episode. As usual, there's a link to do this in the description below. I've got to go, my next patient has just arrived and they've got a rather embarrassing problem that they would rather not share on camera. Shh. Okay, Mr. Martin, you can come in.
I'm glad we cut away when we did. If you'd like to see any of your images on a future surgery session, then there's a link in the usual place with instructions on how to do this. So thank you to everybody who joined us for our PO live show this month, something that we run in partnership with Case Filters UK. Astro landscape photographer Alan Wallace was our guest for the evening, and he talked us through the technical and physical challenges of capturing the night sky as part of a landscape photo. We also discussed the topics that we covered in last month's Photography Online and answered questions from our live audience as they came in. In upcoming shows, we'll be doing some live printing and on-location photo shoots. So with prizes to be won, PO Live is certainly something that you'll enjoy if you like our usual shows. It's available for our supporters of PO Live level or above, so if you're interested in joining us, see the relevant link below. Now, it has been a while since we brought you our analogue affairs feature, so we thought we'd put that right straight away. In a previous show, Marcus talked us through his best method for scanning film on a home scanner, but there are other methods available, each with their own pros and cons. We thought it was time to compare all the options.
There's no denying that we live in a digital world where everything has to happen immediately. But what's the reason for the big hurry? Sometimes it's nice to be able to slow down, relax, and just do things at our own pace, accepting the fact that sometimes stuff just takes a while.
Shooting on film is one of those processes which just can't be rushed, but this is one of its appeals. If I take this picture here today, it could be days or even weeks before I get to see the result. But who cares? The photo's not going anywhere.
99.9% of photos today are displayed and viewed in a digital format. So once we have our film developed, it's still not much use in this format until we convert it into a digital file.
What's the point, I hear being shouted from afar? Why not just shoot digitally in the first place? Well, this is a valid question, and I'll address that in a future feature. But for now, I wanted to show you the options that I have to convert this into ones and zeros so that I can showcase my photos online.
In a previous show, I experimented with various methods of scanning film on a flatbed scanner and got some pretty good results. But there are a couple of other methods available, so I thought it would be good to compare the results as well as looking at the pros and cons of each one.
I'll also be comparing the cost between each method, as these can differ drastically, but I'll assume that you already have a computer and a digital camera.
I've chosen a couple of frames to use as a comparison for this exercise. The first is a cottage, which will be ideal for comparing finer detail and clarity. The second is a seascape shot, which will be ideal to compare dynamic range and the ability to pull out detail from highlight and shadow areas. Both are 6x9 medium format frames, taken on a Fuji GW690 camera, which we did a feature about in this show. The easiest and the cheapest method is to simply take a digital photo of the film itself. Now, if you already have a digital camera and a suitable lens, then you can do this at zero cost. But there are a couple of things that we can do to make sure we get the best possible results. A light table will allow you to do scans at any time of day or night. While these can be expensive, they don't need to cost a lot of money. You can get an A4 one for around £35, so this isn't going to break the bank. All we need to do is tape our negative, or in this case positive, to the light box. One thing which is really important is to mask off any peripheral light, as this will reduce the contrast as any stray light finds its way into the lens. If your film is small, such as 35mm, or even one of the smaller medium format options, then you're going to need a macro lens to allow you to fill the frame with the film. Once everything is set up, it's simply a case of taking a photo in the same way you would usually do, focusing, using the best aperture of the lens, which is usually double the maximum aperture, and getting the optimum exposure. Use a remote release or the self-timer to eliminate any camera movement. So this is the result from using the macro lens on a 50 megapixel digital camera. Looking at this image full frame, it looks perfectly reasonable and would be usable for many purposes. Not bad considering it's the cheapest option. The second option for scanning film is to do it yourself on a flatbed scanner. These vary in price depending on what performance you want, but the scanner generally accepted as being one of the best all-rounders is the Epson V750 Pro, which will set you back around £400 used, or the replacement model, the V850 Pro, which is around £800 new. One of the biggest issues you're likely to find with flatbed scanning is dust. Now, ideally you'd want to do this in a room without any soft furnishings, but for me, that's not an option, so dust is a real issue. All I can say is that you really want to invest as much time in making sure that everything is clean before you do the scan, because it's really going to pay off when you do the edit. Here's the result from using my tried and tested method of taping the film to anti-Newton glass, which I'm reasonably happy with. The third option open to us is something called a drum scan. Now, unless you want to spend a lot of money on a drum scanner for your own home, this is going to be a case of sending your film off to a professional lab. Drum scanning involves fluid mounting the film onto a rotating drum, which spins at high speed as a lens scans it at super high detail. Generally considered as the best possible scanning method, drum scans typically offer better resolution and increased highlight and shadow detail over that of a flatbed scan. But this does come at the price of inconvenience in the form of having to send your film away, plus also the high cost per scan, something we'll compare in a moment. It's probably worth mentioning at this stage that just because it's a drum scan doesn't necessarily mean that it will be good. So much depends on the technician doing the scan that results can vary massively, and if you send the same piece of film off to 5 different labs, you'll probably get 5 different results back. I used a company called Bayer, who are based in London, on the recommendation of a couple of pros I know who consider them to be the best. However, I've also heard negative feedback about other drum scanning services from photographers who said when they got their results back, they weren't even as good as their own flatbed scans. So if you're going to get your film drum scanned and pay lots of money, choose wisely. Here's the Bayer drum scan of the autumnal cottage, which shows great detail along with punchy colours and smooth tones across the entire contrast range. If we now compare each method at 100% side by side, the difference is clear but not huge. We can make out the name of the cottage in each version, but this is more difficult to read on the macro lens version than on the other two. However, the drum scan version is the only one where it's possible to make out that the other sign says private driveway. So this shows that it is pulling out more fine detail from the film than the other two methods, even though they are of similar resolution. Putting detail aside, the drum scan also shows richer colours and a more pleasing contrast. The macro lens version looks quite harsh in this regard. Looking at the other image, this is the macro lens version, on which I seem to have picked up an unwanted reflection on the left-hand side. This would have been due to me having the room lights turned on when I took the shot, so remember to turn off all front lighting if you are scanning film using a digital camera. This was the flatbed scan using my own anti-Newton glass method. And finally, here's the drum scan. Comparing the three different methods, there's an obvious difference in colour balance, but ignore this as these could easily be edited to match. Once again, the macro lens version looks very harsh, as though it's been over-sharpened, even though they've all had the same amount applied. The flatbed scan is perfectly acceptable, but the drum scan has a silkier look to it. When zooming into 100%, the macro version looks immediately sharper, until you realise that this is just the extra contrast and harshness we noticed in the full frame version. The drum scan does just edge it, but it's only a subtle difference here. One area the drum scan does win hands down is with dust. To put it simply, there is none. The flatbed software can remove dust automatically, but it doesn't get it all, and as you can see, there's still some present which would need to be cloned out manually. Not a major deal, but worth mentioning. The digital camera method obviously has no auto dust removal, so this would all need to be done manually. If we look at the cost of doing a single initial scan across all three methods, then using a digital camera is by far the cheapest option, costing us around £35, and that assumes that we need to buy a light box. The most expensive option is the flatbed scanner, because that's going to set us back at least £400, assuming of course we need to buy the scanner. The drum scanning option is pretty much smack bang in the middle, at around £120, but this depends on the file size that you want. However, every subsequent scan is effectively free for options 1 and 2, because we don't have to rebuy the scanner or rebuy the light box. But every time you do a drum scan, you pay again. So if you want to do more than 5 or 6 scans, then option 1 or 2 is by far the most cost effective. But if you only want to do 1 or 2 scans, then drum scanning could be the way to go. Based on the findings here, the drum scan does offer the best overall results, but it's not a runaway winner. It would certainly be worth getting your portfolio shots scanned in this way, especially if you wanted to print them large. If you only want small res files and have time to clone out dust, then the digital camera method is the most economical option and will still provide usable results. The flatbed scanner sits comfortably in the middle, saving you time on cleaning your images and also offering a better result than the digital camera option if you want to get large files. One final thing the drum scan does do better than the others is to keep the end result looking like it was shot on film. The problem with the digital camera method is that the files just end up looking, well, digital.
If you're still asking yourself the question, why not just shoot digitally in the first place, then I'll address this in a future feature of Analog Affairs very soon, so keep a lookout for that.
I know one of the things that puts many people off shooting film is not wanting to deal with the hassle of converting the photos to a digital format, but hopefully that's given you some new options and information. On the subject of film photography, we have just announced an exciting new film-only workshop. Based on the Isle of Harris and Lewis for a week and run in association with Ilford, we'll be offering 10 people the chance to spend 6 nights with us at a private hunting lodge. This will be ideal for anyone who used to shoot film back in the day and wants to rekindle their relationship, or for anybody new to photography since the digital era who's interested in seeing what all the fuss is about. Every person will get 5 rolls of Ilford film to shoot, plus they'll have the option to use a wide variety of various medium format and large format film cameras, so you don't even need to bring your own film camera. Plus, we'll be showing you how to develop your own film at home with just a few basic tools. It promises to be a great week, so if that is something that you might be interested in, there's a link in the usual place. Okay, before I go, I need to tell you the answer to the question I asked at the beginning of the show. What was the resolution of the first ever digital camera? Was it 4 megapixels, 1.2 megapixels, 0.5 megapixels, or 0.01 megapixels? The answer was 0.01 megapixels. Designed by Stephen Sasson, an engineer working for Kodak in 1975, the camera had a sensor 100 by 100 pixels. Today, that would look like this in comparison to a modern camera. We have come a long way, but this journey that we're all on is never ending. There's no destination, but that's what makes it so interesting. Continue the journey with us in just a couple of weeks when I'll be back with another action-packed show, including how to master depth of field, so make sure that you join me for that. Until then, take good care. But most of all, take good photos.
What's the point, I hear?
Due to ongoing travel restrictions, I'm still here in the UK. Whilst...
Because if you put these on a wibbly wobbly one, it's not going to be much use. A wibbly wobbly one.
This is an area where even if you think you understand the concept, sorry. I haven't read it yet. Content still easily like this. Right, here's Marcus, tell us more. Okay.
Whereas if you think you might be doing lots and lots of scans, and Marcus, what are you talking about?
See the rock? And if you can, just check that the screw thread there, screw thread.
They fit any tripod which has the standard 3/8 screw thread.